Indiana University spent about $2 million rehabbing the Jordan River this past year.
Something terrifying and holy just happened. The Jordan River turned red right after a glowing tunnel cracked open under its banks. And a hidden message whispered the return of the King. A glowing word carved itself into a camera. Awake. Tune in now, because the tunnel has opened, the altar is glowing, and a figure just appeared inside. The tunnel no one saw coming. The Jordan River was almost gone. Once wide and strong, now it looked more like a muddy ditch in places. But this place? It's not just any river. It's the same river where Jesus was baptized. The same water that touched the feet of the Son of God. People still come here from all over the world to feel something holy, to touch the water, to remember the past. What they didn't know was that something very old had just been found under the riverbed, and it was still moving. It all began with a strange sound. It wasn't loud or sudden, just different. Something that didn't belong. Deep under the banks near Bethany, beyond the Jordan, workers were laying new irrigation lines when they heard it. A hollow echo beneath the soil. It didn't sound like rock or mud. It didn't sound like anything natural. It felt man-made. Or maybe even older than that. Much older. The workers stopped right away and made some calls. They didn't want to break anything important. 2 days later, a small expert team arrived with sonar scanners. They sent pulses through the ground and waited for the images to come back. What they saw didn't make sense. It was a long, straight space under the riverbank. About 20 feet wide and nearly 8 feet tall. It stretched far, much too far to be natural. This wasn't just a crack in the rocks or a gap in the mud. It was a tunnel, and no one knew where it came from. Because the river had shrunk so much, parts of the land that were once underwater were now exposed. Old things hidden for who knows how long were now rising to the surface. The team decided to go further. They drilled a small, safe hole above the tunnel and lowered cameras inside. What they found stopped them cold. The camera showed stone walls, carved with care. The lines were clean and smooth, not broken or messy like you'd expect from nature. These walls were made on purpose, not by modern machines either. They were too perfect. Along the walls were strange symbols. Some looked like ancient Hebrew. Others didn't look like any known writing at all. But that wasn't the strangest part. At the far end of the tunnel, the camera picked up something unexpected. A light. A soft glow, not from their equipment, not from a flashlight. It pulsed gently, steady and quiet, coming from a small chamber at the tunnel's end. It felt like something was waiting there, watching. The team didn't dare go any further. They worried about the tunnel collapsing. So they pulled back, marked the site, and sent all the footage to historians and theologians. It only took one night before the story broke. All over the world, people were talking about the hidden tunnel under the Jordan River, lined with ancient carvings and glowing with a light no one could explain. And then, something else added to the mystery. Just a few days earlier, a group of pilgrims had been visiting a nearby spot along the river. They said they saw something in the water, a figure, glowing, still, surrounded by a light that didn't come from the sun or any man-made source. The figure didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there. In the same place many believed heaven had once opened. People started wondering, was the light deep in the tunnel the same light seen above the water? Were these signs connected? And that's when the question began to spread. A quiet but powerful question. Is this what Jesus warned about? In the book of Matthew, chapter 24, verse 25, Jesus said, "See, I have warned you beforehand." Many had believed that warning was for long ago, but now it felt different, like it was for this moment, a time of strange events, of signs appearing not just in the sky, but now from deep below the earth. Scientists came in, looking for answers. But others, people of faith, wanted something more. They wanted truth. They wondered if this tunnel was part of a prophecy. Was it built to hide something important? Or to reveal something when the time was right? And what about the glowing light? Was it a forgotten piece of old technology? Or something beyond what science could explain? Digging began again. This time, it was slow and careful. They didn't use drills or big machines. The tunnel was too delicate. The soil above was dry and fragile. The clay below was soft. One wrong move and the whole thing could fall apart. So the team worked by hand, using small tools, moving inch by inch. That's when they reached the second chamber. It was bigger than the first. Like a small room carved into the limestone. There was nothing inside except one thing. In the center of the chamber stood a stone tablet. It was cracked, but still whole. Ancient letters were carved into its face. The writing looked like a mix of Aramaic and something even older. Some of the words matched the Dead Sea Scrolls. Others had never been seen before. One sentence stood out, right across the top of the stone. The river shall speak again when the end is near. Everyone went quiet. The room, the tunnel, the air. Everything felt still. The words matched what had been whispered in old scrolls. They matched what pilgrims said they heard in the wind. They matched what many claimed to feel in their prayers. A message not carried by sound, but by spirit. And now it was written in stone. The team packed the tablet carefully. They sealed it in a crate and sent it to Jerusalem. Scholars began working on the full translation. But even before all the answers came, crowds began to gather. People travelled from nearby towns and from far away. They came to stand near the tunnel. Some sang, some prayed, others wept. They all felt something. Something had changed. News began to spread that the tunnel might be connected to the book of Revelation, that it was a secret place, hidden for the final days. Theories grew quickly. Some thought it was a shelter built during Roman times. Others said it was older than any known history. Some even believed it was not made by humans at all. But everyone agreed on one thing. This was not normal. Then, just when people thought they had seen everything, something new happened. Cameras went back into the tunnel for another scan. This time, something flickered in the video. Just for a moment. A shadow. Not a person. Not an animal. Just a shape. It stood at the far end of the tunnel, and then it was gone. Only one frame, 1 second, then nothing. But the light was still there, and before anyone could make sense of the shadow in the tunnel, something even stranger started to happen right beneath their feet. The pulse beneath the river. The cameras kept recording, and the light in the tunnel didn't fade. It didn't blink or dim. Instead, it pulsed. Slowly, steadily. Like it had a heartbeat. No one could figure out where it came from. There were no wires, no fire, no solar panels. The light wasn't man-made. It came from deep inside the earth. People started calling it the Pulse of the Jordan. No one knew what it meant, but the name stuck. Soon, the dig site was shut off from the public. Fences went up around the area, and guards were brought in to keep people away. But that didn't stop anyone. Every day, crowds still gathered near the fence. Hundreds of people came from nearby towns and faraway places. Some stood quietly and stared. Others got on their knees and prayed. They believed the light was a message, not a story from the past, but a sign for today. Then, just before sunrise one morning, something else happened. The sound came back. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't a machine. It was a low hum that rumbled deep underground, like the earth itself was moaning. The sound lasted for almost 2 minutes. The ground shook beneath everyone's feet. Birds flew off in every direction. Dogs barked like something was wrong. Cameras at the site glitched, and one caught a strange shimmer. Something moved behind the carvings on the tunnel wall. It was blurry, like heat rising off a hot road. and then everything went quiet again. That morning, the digging team made a new discovery. Behind the chamber wall, they found new carvings, symbols that hadn't been there before. The stone around them was scorched, like it had been burned, and no one knew how the markings had appeared overnight. A team in Jerusalem worked to translate them. The full message wasn't clear, but one part stood out. It said, "When the heart of the river beats again, the truth shall rise." Some people believed it was talking about the pulsing light. Others thought it was a warning, a sign that something was coming, maybe even a countdown or a door. A few days later, the team uncovered another strange find, a second tunnel, this one going straight down. It was sealed with an old wooden hatch that had nearly rotted away. When they opened it, a wave of warm air flowed out from the dark shaft. Warm air, coming from underground. They lowered another camera into the hole. The feed came back with static, but one frozen frame shocked the whole crew. In the darkness, there was a symbol carved into the floor, a circle with 3 lines crossing in the middle. Around it were more markings, this time written in Greek. The team translated one part quickly. It said, "This is the seal of the Watchers." That word, Watchers, wasn't new. It shows up in ancient books. The Book of Enoch tells stories of the Watchers. Some were good angels, others had fallen. Those fallen ones were said to be locked away under the earth, waiting for judgment. Many believe the Jordan River flows near the places where those beings once walked. They taught lies. They spread corruption. And now people were asking if this tunnel had something to do with them. Could the pulsing light mean that something buried long ago was waking up? News of the discovery spread fast. Churches across the world called for prayer. Some people fasted. Others joined online groups to talk about what was happening. Many believed this was a sign of prophecy, that Jesus was coming back soon. That time was running out. Then the river itself began to change. At first it was slow, but people noticed. The water directly above the tunnel site began to bubble, just in one spot. The water turned cloudy, then clear, then cloudy again. Scientists tested it. There were no toxins, no heat sources, no underwater vents, just strange motion, like something was moving underneath. Soon after, a local shepherd showed up at the site. He had heard about the tunnel on the radio and brought an old scroll his family had kept for generations. It wasn't an official map. It had no royal seal or priest stamp, but it had drawings, land shapes, landmarks. And in one spot, there was a symbol that caught everyone's attention. The same symbol seen in the tunnel footage, a circle with 3 crossing lines. Under it, in Old Hebrew, were the words, "The place of warning." That word, warning, was spoken many times by Jesus. He warned about false signs, about staying awake when the hour comes, about the final days. Now, that same word was written beneath the Jordan River. Back at the dig site, the team made one final breakthrough. Behind a stone panel, they discovered a hollow space. Inside it was a box. It wasn't made of gold. It didn't shine. It was carved from black basalt stone, heavy and cold. Dust covered the surface. It took 4 men to lift it. The lid was sealed with an old tar-like resin. When they finally opened it, everyone froze. Inside the box were scrolls, dozens of them, rolled tight and wrapped in old cloth. But that wasn't all. Also inside was a small bronze object. It looked like a trumpet, but it had carvings on the side, words taken straight from the book of Revelation. But what came next didn't just confirm their fears, it gave them new ones. The scrolls speak. Scholars, priests and historians gathered in Jerusalem to study them. They laid each scroll out flat, using special tools to scan and translate without breaking them. Every word was fragile. Every letter felt important. The largest scroll contained 3 lines that made everyone stop. When the river breaks and the seal is lifted, prepare the earth, for the fire from above shall follow. It was written in thick red ink, still visible after all these years. The phrase "fire from above" sparked fear, but it also brought clarity. Many said this was not just an old warning, it was a step-by-step guide. The scroll listed 3 signs that would come before the return of the king. The first was the pulse in the water. That had already happened. The second was a voice heard in silence. Pilgrims at the Jordan had described just that. Gentle words on the wind, calling them to prepare. And the third, a shaking in the deep. That one had not happened yet. Not until the tunnel trembled. It was just past 2 in the morning when the ground moved. Not like an earthquake, not violent, just a long, low shake that rolled under the earth for nearly 40 seconds. Lights flickered. The tunnel cameras caught dust falling and tiny cracks opening in the floor. The scroll's third sign had arrived. That tremor hit the global news cycle like lightning. TikTok clips, live streams and headlines all screamed the same message. Prophecy fulfilled. One pastor went live to read Revelation 9:14, which speaks of 4 angels bound at a great river, waiting to be released. Most people think it refers to the Euphrates, but now they weren't so sure. Could the Jordan River hold the same kind of secret? The tunnel team didn't stop after the tremor. They dug deeper, carefully, slowly. That's when they uncovered something massive, a square wall of stone blocks, fitted tightly together like an ancient puzzle. It wasn't just rock. It was made, designed. At the center was a door sealed shut. Above the doorway, chiseled into the stone, were the words, "This is the gate. None shall pass until the time is full." No one could get it open. No one tried to force it. Not yet. But people took notice. Some believed this was the gate Jesus spoke of in Matthew 7, when he said, "Enter through the narrow gate." Others thought it could be a prison, a place built to hold something back, not let something in. A week later, the Jordan River began to bubble again. The same spot, the same strange current. But this time, the water turned red. Not bright red, not fake. Just deep enough to look wrong, like rusted blood. People fell to their knees. Some cried, others sang hymns. Scientists arrived quickly. They tested the water and found nothing dangerous. No pollution, no chemicals, just minerals, normal ones. But the colour didn't come from any source they could explain. It appeared suddenly. It lasted for an hour. Then it was gone. That was the moment faith leaders from around the world joined together. Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, Messianic, all issued a call to prayer. The signs were too clear. The pulse, the voice, the shaking, the blood in the water. It was all lining up. People were told to prepare, to turn back to God, to open their Bibles, to listen. Then another sign came. At sunrise, above the Jordan, the sky lit up. No lightning, no storm. Just one straight beam of golden light from the clouds down to the ground. It lasted 5 minutes, long enough for every phone in the area to catch it, long enough for people to stand in silence and stare. News reporters called it a sun pillar. Scientists said it could be a rare weather pattern. But the crowd didn't care. They had already decided. This wasn't weather. This was wonder. The beam of light landed exactly where the tunnel entrance had been uncovered, direct hit, as if heaven itself had found the spot and pointed right at it. Believers everywhere shared the same thought. God was no longer whispering. He was shouting. Inside the tunnel, the light continued to glow. The pulse hadn't faded. The cameras still showed it at the far end, a steady heartbeat under the river. But something changed that night. The camera at the lowest part of the tunnel, the one closest to the sealed shaft, shut off. Not because the power failed. It was yanked. When the team pulled it up, the wire was melted at the end. The casing was cracked. But carved into the back was a single word. It wasn't scratched or burned. It was carved perfectly. Awake. No one admitted to doing it. The feed had been constant. No people had entered the tunnel that day. The Word had simply appeared. And it wasn't just a word, it was a message. The Watchers are mentioned in ancient texts like the Book of Enoch. They were angels who rebelled and were cast down. Some say they were bound in the deep. Others say they still walk unseen. But now the talk was different. The Watchers were not asleep anymore. The warning was clear. The gate had been found. The scrolls had spoken. The sky had opened. And the river, once still, now trembled with meaning. People everywhere began to ask the question, is this what Jesus warned us about? Is the Jordan River the place where the end begins? Then came the gate, and everything changed. The gate that waited. The sealed gate under the Jordan River was quiet. It didn't shake, it didn't open, but it stood there like it had been waiting for something, waiting for centuries. The dig team had found it by accident, but now they were afraid to touch it again. The words above it, "None shall pass until the time is full," kept playing in their minds. What time? Whose time? And what happens when that time is up? Not far from the tunnel, a group of researchers set up base. They wanted to understand what was happening, not just physically, but spiritually. Some were believers, some were skeptics, but everyone felt it. The air was thick, not with heat, but with pressure, as if something below was watching or listening. The pulse was still beating inside the tunnel, like a slow drum, every 6 seconds. Soft, steady, impossible to explain. Cameras showed no movement near it, but the light hadn't faded. It still glowed like it was alive. And every time the pulse flashed, a faint hum echoed through the shaft. News around the world kept covering it. People started calling the site the Gate of the Deep. Some compared it to Noah's Ark. Others called it a warning bell. Churches ran out of seats. People flooded into services. Prayer chains were lit up across continents. Some said it was fear. Others called it awakening. Then came the discovery no one expected. A second box, hidden behind a false wall in the side chamber. It was smaller than the first one, but heavier. Inside was something simple. A single scroll, wrapped in gold-threaded linen, tightly bound. When they opened it, only a few lines were written, but those lines were powerful. He shall return as in the days of fire. The sky shall open, the ground shall part, and the breath of the river shall rise as a flame. No one understood what breath of the river meant until the next day. That morning, just after sunrise, steam began to rise from the water directly above the tunnel. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't mist from cold air. The water wasn't cold. The Jordan River at that section had turned warm. People stepped in and said it felt like a hot spring. But there was no heat source underground. No vent. Nothing to cause it. Just warmth and that rising steam. Photos showed the steam twisting in the air like it had shape, like a pattern. Some said they saw a figure. Others claimed it looked like wings. One photo went viral. It showed what looked like a man's form in the steam, arms outstretched, facing the sky. Was it Jesus? No one could say for sure. But those who stood near it fell to their knees, even the ones who didn't believe. Back at the sealed gate, something else changed. A fine crack appeared across the middle of the stone door. It wasn't large, not even an inch wide, but it ran from top to bottom, like a silent signal. And from that crack came air. Not foul, not sweet, just different. Thick, like it came from another world. The team measured the pressure behind the door. It had risen overnight. Something behind the stone was pushing outward. Not hard, not enough to break it, just enough to show that it was no longer still. Word spread fast. One Israeli historian went on television and said the location matched an old story from the Book of Kings, a story about a prophet who sealed a sacred item beneath the Jordan to keep it safe until the last days. The story was thought to be legend, Now, people were rereading it like a map, and the warnings kept building. In nearby towns, strange things began happening. Frogs appeared in places they hadn't been seen in years. Not just one or two, hundreds, crawling near the water's edge, hiding in roadside ditches, climbing onto temple steps. It reminded everyone of Exodus, of the plagues in Egypt, the river turning red, the frogs rising from the banks. The patterns were no longer just familiar, they were exact. One local pastor said, "God is not repeating history, He's reminding us of it." Back in the tunnel, the scrolls were being read line by line. One phrase stood out, "The stone shall crack, and a whisper will follow." The crack had come. Now they waited for the whisper. It came 2 nights later. The tunnel cameras picked up a low sound, not a voice, not words, just a hum, so quiet that most people missed it. But when the footage was slowed down and the sound raised, the hum became clearer. It carried a rhythm, a simple phrase repeated again and again. "Prepare the way." It played 6 times, then silence. The team checked the feed. No one had entered the tunnel, no equipment had changed. The hum had come from inside the sealed chamber, from behind the stone door. And it wasn't just sound. The pulse at the far end of the tunnel sped up. Not much, just by half a second. But it changed. The rhythm had shifted. It now beat every 5.5 seconds. No explanation, no cause. The light glowed brighter for a few minutes, then dimmed again. People said the gate was breathing, that it was alive, that it had begun to wake up. The next morning, something new appeared outside the tunnel entrance. A small stone, perfectly round, placed directly in the centre of the path. It wasn't there the night before. No one had rolled it in. It didn't match the rock from the surrounding area, and etched into the surface were 3 words. "The King comes." And when the pulse changed, the King did not wait. The final scene. The tunnel under the Jordan River had become the centre of the world. News crews stayed parked for days, cameras pointed toward the entrance. Helicopters circled above, keeping watch. Pilgrims came from every direction, walking for miles just to get close. Nobody cared about the fences anymore. Crowds stood shoulder to shoulder on the riverbanks. Some were praying, others were singing. But all of them were waiting. Deep underground, the gate pulsed. The crack in the stone door had grown larger. It now stretched from the top to the bottom, wide enough to slide a hand inside. A warm breeze escaped through the crack. It carried a strange smell, like dirt, like old metal, and something so ancient it could not be named. It was the kind of smell that reminded people of old blood and new fire. It made their hearts race, but it also gave them peace. Then, just before the sun rose, everything changed. The pulsing stopped. The light at the end of the tunnel went dark. For the first time since it had been found, the glow was gone. The soft hum vanished. The strange heartbeat of the river had disappeared. People gasped when they saw it. Some even cried. Many thought the sign had ended, but it hadn't. They were wrong. This was not the end. This was the shift. As the sun broke over the hills, the light returned, but it didn't blink or flicker like before. It poured. A beam of white fire shot out from the tunnel's mouth. It didn't burn or break anything, but it was too bright to look at. The air filled with light so strong that cameras shut down. Workers near the gate dropped their tools and fell to the ground. Not from pain, but from something stronger. They were overwhelmed by the power. One technician, who later watched the recordings, said it looked like the tunnel had swallowed the sun. At the same time, the river above began to act strangely. The surface went calm. Too calm. No wind, no ripples, just stillness. Then a glowing shape appeared just under the water. It wasn't a person. It was a symbol. A circle with 3 lines shining like fire beneath the surface. It stayed there for nearly 10 minutes. Then it vanished. But something even greater happened below. The sealed gate began to move. The heavy stone, untouched for centuries, started to shift. It groaned like mountains grinding together. The workers stepped back in fear. No one touched it. The door opened all on its own. Behind it was a staircase, carved from the rock, leading down into the dark. The air that came out wasn't hot or cold. It was clean. So clean it didn't feel like it belonged to this world. One worker said it felt like walking into the Garden of Eden. Another said it felt like standing before judgment. When the cameras were lowered inside, what they showed left everyone speechless. The room behind the gate was a temple. Stone walls were carved with symbols no one had seen before. The columns were lined with silver and copper. At the far end stood an altar. On top of it was a black stone plate, smooth as glass. Across its face, glowing in pale gold, were just 3 words: "He is near." It was not a warning. It was not a threat. It was simply the truth. People from every country came to Jordan. They didn't come to take pictures. They didn't come to study history. They came looking for answers. This wasn't just about a tunnel anymore. It was about time, about prophecy, about the final chapter. Pastors began reading from Luke 21:28, saying, "When these things begin to happen, lift your heads, for your redemption is near." Others quoted Revelation, Ezekiel, and Daniel. The symbols found inside were matched to old prophecies. The staircase looked like drawings found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The glowing altar plate reminded scholars of the Ark of the Covenant. Experts argued, but believers didn't wait. They already knew what it meant. The king was coming. Then came the final sign. It happened 3 days after the gate opened. At sunset, the sky above the river turned dark red. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't dust. The sky was clear, but the sun looked like it was bleeding. And from that light came a sound, a trumpet. It didn't come from the sky. It didn't come from any known instrument. It came from below, deep under the earth. The sound was long and low, like a shofar. It was the same kind of sound described in the Bible in 1 Thessalonians 4:16. The Lord will come down from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an angel, and with the trumpet of God. The trumpet blew once, then the world went still. People fell to their knees. Some screamed, others cried, but all of them felt the sound inside their bones. That night, something appeared in the tunnel again. The cameras showed a figure standing near the glowing altar. It wasn't walking. It wasn't moving. It just stood there, dressed in white, surrounded by light. No one could see its face, but no one needed to. The figure raised one hand toward the sky. Then it disappeared. The light stayed behind, and the words on the altar changed. Another message appeared beneath the first. The time is now. In the days that followed, the world began to shift. Not because of money, not because of war, but because people woke up. Millions returned to prayer. Churches stayed open all night. Bibles sold out everywhere. Families who hadn't spoken in years came back together. Enemies forgave each other. Fear began to fade. People no longer watched the sky to see the weather. They watched the sky for signs of the King. Some people still laughed. Some still said it was fake. But even they felt something deep inside. This wasn't just a news story. It wasn't a strange event. It was something more. It was a sign, a message, a call. From the river that once opened for Joshua, to the place where Jesus was baptized, to the tunnel hidden far beneath the ground, the Jordan River had spoken again. And this time, the message was clear. The King is coming. Is this a promise from God, or a warning we are not listening to? Hit like, tell us what you think in the comments, and subscribe for more big stories.